Good afternoon, everyone. A warm welcome to all of you to the Indian Council of World Affairs this afternoon. Before we begin, may I request you to kindly put your mobile phone on silent mode. As we all know, we have gathered here for a panel discussion on India-Egypt ties in changing global order, being organized at a curtain raiser on the occasion of His Excellency Mr. Abdul Fattah al-Sisi, President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, visit to India as the chief guest at India Republic Day celebration on January 26, 2023. Today's program will begin with the welcome remarks by Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh, Director General of Indian Council of World Affairs. Her remarks will be followed by keynote address by Dr. Ausaf Sayeed, Secretary CPV and OIA, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, who will also chair the panel discussion that will follow thereafter. The distinguished panelists of discussion are His Excellency Mr. Wael Mohamed Awad Hamid, Ambassador of Egypt to India, who will deliver special remarks, Ambassador Navdeep Suri, former Ambassador of India to Egypt and UAE, Mr. Atul Aneja, Editor India Narrative, and Mr. P.S. Jayaraman, Chairman TCI Sanmar Chemicals. Then we will have a brief interactive session among the panelists and Q&A moderated by the chair. Now I would like to request Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh, DG ICWA, to give her welcome remarks. Thank you.
A very warm welcome to the Indian Council of World Affairs. Today's panel discussion is on India-Egypt ties in a changing global order. This panel discussion is taking place on the occasion of the visit of His Excellency Mr. Abdul Fattah al-Sisi, President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, who will be coming to India as the chief guest for India's Republic Day celebrations on 26th of January. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Ausaf Sayeed, Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, for agreeing to deliver the keynote address and also for chairing today's event. I would also like to extend a special gratitude to His Excellency Mr. Wael Mohamed Awad Hamid, Ambassador of Egypt to India, for accepting our invitation and agreeing to deliver special remarks in today's panel discussion. I'm equally thankful to other members of the panel, Ambassador Navdeep Suri, former Ambassador of India to Egypt and to the UAE, Mr. Atul Aneja, Editor of Indian Narratives, and Mr. P.S. Jayaraman, who is the Chairman of TCI Sanmar Chemicals, for joining in the panel discussion today. I also welcome members of the diplomatic corps, academic and strategic community, and other dignitaries in the audience, including Ambassador Sanjay Singh, as well as Joint Secretary Pradeep Rajpurohit. President al-Sisi will be the chief guest at India's Republic Day in the year when India and Egypt are celebrating the 75th year of the establishment of diplomatic relations. Invitation as chief guest on Republic Day, a day so important in India's national annual calendar, is an honor that India accords to its close and friendly partners. Both India and Egypt, apart from being two ancient and great civilizations, are also strong voices for the global South. The forthcoming visit will be the third visit by President al-Sisi to India since he became president. His maiden visit to India was in October 2015, when he participated in the third India-Africa Forum Summit, and later he visited India in September 2016, when he was warmly welcomed here on his state visit. The current visit by President al-Sisi is very crucial, not only from the bilateral perspective, but also because the visit is taking place at a time when the world politics is in a flux. COVID pandemic has caused unprecedented disarray, and the Russian-Ukraine conflict has grave consequences for global food, energy, and fertilizer security, especially for the developing countries. As president of G20 for the year 2022-23, India has invited Egypt as a guest country to G20 meetings. All this is reflective of the widening horizon of India-Egypt relationship, a testimony to India's growing focus on the larger Arab world in general, and Egypt as a traditional political and strategic partner in particular. In this fast-changing scenario in world politics, it becomes important for countries like India and Egypt to share perceptions, to take stock of our present relationship, so as to chart the future. Today's panels will look at India-Egypt ties and their shared values and interests in a changing global order. ICWA, on its part, has 2 MOU partners in Egypt. We have dialogue with the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs. We've held 4 such dialogues, and also we've recently signed an MOU with the Al-Haram University. So with these words and with this background, I thank all of you for joining us today, and I look forward to a very fruitful discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I'd like to request Dr. Ausaf Sayeed to deliver his keynote address. Thank you.
Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh, Director General, Indian Council of World Affairs, Ambassador His Excellency Mr. Wael Mohamed, Ambassador of Arab Republic of Egypt to India, Ambassador Navdeep Suri, Mr. Atul Aneja, Mr. P.S. Jayaraman, the eminent panelists who are with us today, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon to all of you, and I welcome you all to this panel discussion on India-Egypt ties in the changing global order. This has been planned, as was said, as a run-up to the forthcoming visit of Honorable President of Arab Republic of Egypt, His Excellency Mr. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. I thank DG ICWA and her team for organizing this event at a very short notice. I also thank all eminent panelists and the audience for taking time for this very important discussion that is to follow. This is indeed a momentous occasion in our bilateral relations with Egypt, when our 2 countries are celebrating 75 years of establishment of diplomatic relationship. I was told that when we became independent on 15th of August 1947, it was 3 days later, on 18th of August, that the formal relations were established, so which goes on to say the importance which we attach to our relationship with Egypt. Our Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, has invited President Sisi as chief guest of our Republic Day, and the invitation has been warmly accepted by President Sisi. We have also, as you all know, invited Egypt as the guest country during our G20 presidency this year. It's a matter of satisfaction that the age-old civilization links between India and Egypt have not only stood the test of time, but have also further strengthened by mutual warmth, friendship, and goodwill. We all know about the famous edicts of Ashoka, which refer to the relations with Egypt under Ptolemy II. In modern times, of course, Mahatma Gandhi and Egyptian revolutionary leader Saad Zaghloul shared common goals for the freedom of their respective countries. Our focus today is to strengthen this bond and at the same time nurture new connections. Egypt is our valued partner and has a pivotal role in maintaining peace and stability in the Arab world and in Africa. India-Egypt partnership has immense potential and can achieve greater heights based on commonalities of Global South, which we historically share. We have excellent cooperation in multilateral forums and good understanding on regional and global issues. The relationship received momentum with visits of President Sisi to India in 2015 for the IFS 3 and again in 2016, which was the state visit. Our Prime Minister and President Sisi have been meeting on the margins of several international forums, particularly UNGA 2015, BRICS 2017, and so on and so forth. During the pandemic time, the cooperation between our 2 countries has further strengthened. So as we speak now, our multifaceted bilateral engagement has further intensified. 3 key visits have taken place from our side in the last 4 months. We had the Defense Minister, Shri Rajnath Singh, who visited in September 2022. This was followed by the visit of External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar in October 2022, and then the Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Shri Bhupendra Yadav in November 2022 for COP27. While currently the Egypt's Minister of Communications and Information Technology, Dr. Amrit Talat, was in India actually last week for a very successful visit where he visited Delhi and Bangalore. In addition, we continue to have a series of visits by high-level officials, service chiefs, and other functionaries on both sides, providing much-needed thrust to our ties, and which were halted due to pandemic. And we are resuming all these visits, in the months ahead. Our economic engagement has enhanced significantly in the recent years, with an all-time high bilateral trade of US $7.26 billion in 2021 and 22. We hope that this trade will further increase to about 12 billion in times to come. This is a target we are setting up. Our trade basket is also diversifying. I'm also pleased to note that Indian companies are making significant investments in Egypt, and currently our investments are put at the level of US $3.15 billion. Indian companies have generated employment to the tune of 38,000 in Egypt. We are glad to note that in the last few months, 3 Indian companies have signed MOUs worth US $18 billion producing green hydrogen in Egypt. There is also tremendous scope for us to expand our economic and commercial ties in different fields, particularly in the renewable energy sector. We are also glad to see that a robust partnership is evolving in the field of defense with Egypt. The collaboration has been manifesting in the form of joint exercises and active participation of defense exhibitions and training modules. Our defense industries are also keen to work together to explore new collaboration possibilities. Thus, I would say that the multifaceted partnership between India and Egypt is gaining strength in several areas such as security, renewable energy, infrastructure, IT, pharmaceuticals, agriculture, higher education, science and technology, etc. It is heartening to note that many Egyptian professionals and students have benefited from our various capacity building programs and scholarships. More than 1,500 Egyptian officials have benefited from our flagship program, ITEC, since 2000 and 2001. Egyptian students are also availing scholarship facilities offered under the ICCR as well as under the India-Africa Forum partnership. We have so far extended 83 scholarships to Egyptian students. Apart from this, India has also hosted diplomats from Egypt from time to time at our Sushma Swaraj Institute for Foreign Service. A dedicated course for 33 Egyptian diplomats is being planned this year in September. As you are perhaps aware that India had established MACIC, the Maulana Azad Center for Indian Culture in Cairo in 1992. Incidentally, I was involved in the formation of that center. I was a probationer attached to MACIC, and I share very warm memories of setting up that center and how that center over a period of time, emerged as a very important, vibrant hub for cultural exchange, teaching yoga, teaching languages, and also being a connecting link, between India and Egypt in terms of Bollywood and other cultural experiences. And as we know that yoga has become extremely popular worldwide, and Egypt also, it is very, very popular since those days in 1992. The International Day of Yoga is organized at iconic venues in Egypt, and it generates a lot of interest. And as I mentioned that there is a huge popularity of Bollywood films in Egypt. And again, going back to my days in Egypt, when once Amitabh Bachchan landed up there, perhaps in 1992, thousands and thousands of people had gathered outside, and again, we could see that the momentum which was generated in terms of artists from Egypt and India, trying to work together. We also see now in the current context that Indian TV serials are very, very popular, becoming very popular in Egypt. We as diplomats who have opted to choose Arabic language, many of us, me and my colleague Dr. Pradeep Raj Purohit inclusive, and I think, I don't know whether you had done in Cairo also. So Cairo is a very important center for all of us to begin our careers. So to say, we not only learn the language, but also become a kind of brand ambassadors for Egypt. And as they say that once you drink the water of Nile, you come back again. I'm waiting for that time to go back to drink the water of Nile again. So I would see that the partnership between India and Egypt is definitely a win-win equation for both our countries. I am confident that these relations will continue to strengthen and move on the upward trajectory, scale new heights, and bring in newer areas for collaboration, for our mutual benefit. And today I am very confident that our discussions focusing on the forthcoming visit of President Sisi to India and his discussions which will take place would not only lay a strong foundation for India for a future collaboration in diverse areas. I firmly believe that our conversation this afternoon by the eminent panelists will throw light on what is in store for Egypt and India in the light of the global changes that are taking place. I would conclude by once again thanking the ICWA for organizing this very useful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to hand over the proceeding to Dr. Ausaf Sayeed, who will chair the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you, once again for joining us this afternoon. So I would follow the order which is given here. So I would like to invite, at the outset, His Excellency Ambassador Wael Mohamed Awad Hamid, Ambassador of the Arab Republic of Egypt to India, to share his perspective, to share his vision, to share what are his expectations for the forthcoming visit of President Sisi to India. Over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Dr. Ausaf Sayeed, Secretary, CPP. But I also have to start. I hope I'm audible to everybody. Oh, I'm sorry. The mic. Okay, I'll get closer and I'll speak loud. I was just saying that I'm very happy here to be in the Indian Council of World Affairs. I have to extend my appreciation to Ambassador Vijay Singh for inviting us to this very timely discussion. I appreciate it, and I extend my thankfulness to the ICWA. Today, when we're speaking about the visit of His Excellency, the President of the Arab Republic of Egypt to India, we are truly speaking about a historic moment. And unlike, I think everybody would agree with me that diplomats usually speak about this being historic, that being historic, but everything is historic for diplomats. But in this case, it is truly historic. And it is historic in the sense that Egypt and India are two civilizational countries that are coming together now, put their hand together. And again, usually when we speak about Egypt and India, we speak about the heyday of relations in the 1950s and 1960s at the time of President Nasser in Egypt and Prime Minister Nehru in India. But even at that time, we have to remember that even President Nasser was not here as a chief guest for Republic Day. So this is the first time, and it is truly historic in that sense. And I think it will be a very good opportunity to renew our friendship, to put it on a new height, to forge a really strategic kind of relationship based on the similarities that we have between the priorities of His Excellency President Sisi and the priorities and the national interest of India as presented by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. We have to remember that both of them came to their positions in 2014, and ever since then we have seen great progress in both countries along the road towards development and modernization of India and Egypt in a way that makes us very similar in all respect. So in that sense, I think we are truly speaking about a historical visit. But it's also coming at a time when the world is seeing radical changes. The world we are living in today is not the world of the 1950s and the 1960s, when we were speaking about non-aligned movement, and the issues of that time are so much different than the issues that we are speaking of today. And even though they're different, yet there are some similarities. We are living now in a world that is characterized by many challenges related to the pandemic, challenges related to the crisis in Ukraine, challenges related to food security, to energy security, and so on and so forth, to development, to finance development. And these are all issues that Egypt and India are very much aligned in. And therefore, it did not come as a surprise that Egypt is invited by the Indian presidency for the G20. This is truly going to be two countries coming together to represent the voice of the South on the international level. These are two big countries. Of course, India is the biggest country in the world when it comes to population, or at least is going to be so by the end of this year. Egypt is the biggest country in terms of population in the Middle East. So these are two countries that can come together and truly represent the global South. And just a few days ago, I hope we all followed the event on the global South and the speech of His Excellency Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So in general, whether bilaterally or internationally, I think both countries come together now and to say together that we are starting a new strategic partnership. So what is this strategic partnership based on? Bilaterally, it's based on many pillars. First of all, just like His Excellency Mr. Ausaf Sayeed mentioned, the defense and security pillar. When we speak about India and its position in the world, we have to always remember that India is the major country in the Indian Ocean. And the security of the Indian Ocean starts from the security of the Red Sea in the West. And for Egypt, on the Suez Canal, the security of the Suez Canal starts with the security of the Red Sea. So we are both linked together in this respect. The Indian Ocean and the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. This is one continuum that flows from one into the other, and both of them depend on each other for their security. And also, it is bringing us closer in terms of the military creed of the two armed forces of India and of Egypt. We are two countries that have traditionally been known as very disciplined militaries that have never been belligerent before. These are two countries that are really forces of peace in their respective regions. And based on this, we have many collaborations when it comes to joint exercises, when it comes to trainings, when it comes to the number of naval ships coming into Egypt, colons in Egypt. And there are a lot of events taking place between both countries. Maybe as we are speaking now, we have for the first time ever military exercises, special forces participating together, Egypt and India, in Udaipur, on Jodhpur. Right. So, and this is for the first time ever. So, in other words, what I'm saying here is that we are expanding our defense cooperation not only to joint exercises in air forces, in naval, but also in special forces. So there are always new opportunities and new areas on which we can cooperate. When it comes to trade and investment, of course, yes, we have reached an unprecedented level of $7.2 billion in bilateral trade, and we have agreed to reach a level of 12 billion maybe 5 years from now. But I still believe that even the 12 billion that we are aiming for does not really represent the potentials of both countries. There is much more that we can do together. And I think that Egypt provides India with an enormous opportunity. If you look simply at the geographical location of Egypt, at the crossroads between Asia, Europe, and Africa, just by the geographical location should be very attractive. But this is also complemented by what is even more important, and that is, I always say that India is a huge market of 1.4 billion people, but Egypt is also a place where you can access 1.4 billion people, even though our population is only only, between inverted commas, 100 million people. But from Egypt, you can reach the people in the European Union, the market of the European Union, with which we have a free trade agreement, the market in the Middle East and the Arab countries, with which we also have a free trade agreement, and also the continent of Africa, with which we have a free trade agreement. So this makes Egypt a springboard to a market of approximately 1.4 or 1.3 billion people. So by coming and investing in Egypt, and especially along the Suez Canal, in the Suez Canal economic zone, you have an opportunity to tap into all of these markets. And as if this was not enough, no, we also provide incentives to the ones who are coming to invest in Egypt. So over and above the location, over and above the market access, there are also incentives, and there is also the cutting down of the distance between India and all of these markets, because basically an Indian company that is locating in Egypt will be cutting down the distance between India and Europe into approximately half, with all the associated cut downs in insurance, in fuel, also in time. We're living in a period where supply chains really depend on being responsive in terms of time. So this is also very important for any investor to come to Egypt. So trade, yes, has reached 7.2 billion. Investment, yes, has reached 3.1 or 3.2 billion US dollars, but the potentials that are still there, untapped, waiting for both countries to really make use of them, are enormous. And I hope that this coming visit is going to be an opportunity for both countries to look into the opportunities that they can look into together. His Excellency Dr. Ausaf Sayeed has mentioned green hydrogen and energy in general. Energy security and food security, I like to deal with them both together in one package, because these are issues that have gained more and more importance in light of the Ukraine crisis. Now, we have seen already 3 Indian companies coming to Egypt, investing in green hydrogen, and the market is, I was speaking to one of the countries, I was a newcomer to what green hydrogen is all about. I'm not an expert on this. So I had one of the companies explain to me, and I came to understand that the market potentials, the demand, especially in Europe, for green hydrogen is practically speaking unlimited. So the market is there, the opportunities are there, and 3 companies have already come to Egypt. One of them has, all 3 of them have signed a memorandum of understanding, but one of the 3 has actually signed the legally binding framework agreement to start the production. In food security, a very much welcomed development took place last year in 2022 in April, when Egypt approved India as a source of, or as a country from which Egypt can import wheat. Unfortunately, we have seen, of course, because of the issues related to climate change and the heat wave that hit India last year, unfortunately we have seen the ban on export, which we completely understand, but we hope that this ban will be lifted sometime soon if the weather conditions allow for this. And in this respect, it's not only wheat that we are looking for, but we are also looking, because we know that it's very important for India as well as one of the countries that are importers of fertilizers. So wheat from India and fertilizers from Egypt coming together can play a major role in addressing the issue of food security in both our countries. So when it comes to food security and when it comes to energy security, we can complement each other and we can play major roles in this as well. Of course, there are other areas we can speak about. We were just mentioning that the Egyptian Minister of Information Technology was here last week in Delhi as well as in Bangalore, and I was with the minister in part of his meetings, and the enormous potentials that were identified by both sides is just absolutely stunning. And there is a welcoming approach from the Indian side and a welcoming approach from the Egyptian side as well. So this is one of the areas that is going to see major breakthroughs over the coming years. as well as when we speak about pharmaceuticals, when we speak about higher education, and when we speak about many other areas in which we can identify potentials for future cooperation. Now, this is the bilateral pillars, but I would say that other than the bilateral pillars of a strategic relationship, we also have international pillars. As I was mentioning before, Egypt has been invited as a chief country as a guest country for the G20, and together, Egypt and India can provide, can express the voice of the global South. I was also very much like everybody of us, I would say, I was following closely on the positions of India on the Ukraine crisis and all the polarization that was going on between the East and the West. And personally, I admire to a large extent the very disciplined position that India has taken as an independent country, a country that is looking after its interests without tilting to this camp, to this side or to that side, because it is very difficult at a time of polarization to be independent and to take first the interests into account. And India has been doing exactly that, and Egypt has been exactly that. And I can safely say that when Minister Jaishankar was in Cairo, he met with President Sisi, and the issues of the Ukraine crisis were discussed at length, and I think to a large extent our views on this issue overlap on the details as well as on the challenges and the issues that we have to tackle. On the Ukraine, on the economic issues and the G20. Egypt last year in November hosted COP27. And in COP27, basically, I don't want to go into the details of COP27 and all the issues related to climate change, but basically what we can say is COP27 in general was about the idea of addressing this issue in a comprehensive way, including how to compensate the loss and damages that took place in the developing countries because of the global phenomena of climate change. And of course, one of the main pillars of addressing climate change is the idea of coming up with economically and environmentally viable and sustainable projects. But as always, the problem for developing countries lies in finance. And then we come to the G20. G20 is a forum for the 20 biggest economies in the world to address all these global issues, including the issue of finance. So the invitation of Egypt as a guest country to the G20, I see it as a natural continuation to Egypt's role as in COP27, and therefore I think Egypt is going to play a very important role, and the participation of Egypt in the G20 is going to provide the whole of the group with a value added when it comes to issues related to environment change, when it comes to issues related to development, to finance, to debt burden for in developing countries. So in general, these are all topics on which, to a large extent, Egypt and India see eye to eye and can come together and play an important role. So basically, the agenda that we have in front of us for the visit of President Sisi as chief guest in Republic Day is vast, is in all directions, and the visit in that sense is truly historic. The first time an Egyptian president is here for Republic Day as chief guest, and I always look at this visit as an opportunity to start a new chapter in relations between Egypt and India, a chapter that is characterized by real strategic cooperation that is based on the current issues that the international community is facing, not on things that have to do with the past, even though the past is important and the past has seen us come closer in many respects, but the issues have changed, and therefore the priorities have changed, and therefore the modalities of tackling these issues have changed as well. So this is an opportunity to tackle all these issues and to forge a strong kind of strategic partnership that will take us into the future, both of us together, as important developing countries. I don't want to speak too much. I think this was too long, but I think I will keep the rest for any further interaction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Wael Mohamed. You have, gave a good overview of the current visit and the context of the visit and the outcomes which are to be expected. A new strategic partnership is emerging between India and Egypt. You have said that the security of the Indian Ocean is closely linked to the security of Red Sea, and which in turn is closely linked to the security of Suez Canal. Suez Canal is important because 12% of the world trade goes through that. There has been a revenue generation of close to $8 billion in the Suez Canal. You have also said that Egypt, because of its free trade agreements with several countries, particularly in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, could be a gateway for Indian exports. We also note your commitment to strengthen the voice of the South by the cooperation between our two countries. You have also suggested that the two countries can tide over food security by supplying wheat from India and in return fertilizers from Egypt. Thank you very much for all your very valuable comments. Now I would like to invite somebody who has been who's been having hands-on experience with our mission in Cairo as serving as the ambassador of that country. And it was during his tenure there that a lot of development, especially on the economic front and the trend of Indian companies going there and making investments in a big way started during that time. I am referring to Ambassador Navdeep Suri, who is currently the Distinguished Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. He is also an advisor of several prestigious international organizations and an independent director on the board of several reputed companies. He is also a professor of eminence at the Guru Nanak Dev University in Amritsar. Apart from serving in diplomatic mission in Cairo, he also served in Damascus, Washington, Dar es Salaam, London, and so on and so forth. When he served as ambassador to UAE, in a very rare gesture, the president of UAE had conferred on him the Order of Zayed II, the country's second highest civilian award. So, with these brief introductory words, may I invite Ambassador Navdeep Suri to share his perspective on what he expects from this visit.
Thank you very much, Secretary Ausaf Sayeed, for that very generous introduction. After you've spoken and Ambassador Wael Mohamed have spoken, I'm actually scratching my head to see what is left. You've both given such a comprehensive presentation of the agenda for the forthcoming visit. Let me start then, take advantage of the fact that I'm now a retired diplomat and I have a fair bit of latitude in terms of what I can say. To just start by saying that while it's a very, very positive step by the government of India to extend this invitation to President Sisi, it's also a fact that a reciprocal visit by our Prime Minister is well overdue. And I certainly hope that just to keep the pace of growth in relationship, that visit happens sooner rather than later. Because what we've seen in the past is a pattern of sporadic bursts of activity which couldn't be sustained for any extended period of time. I really think that we are in a new era and it will need that consistent attention to each other over a longish period of time. The second thing I would add is that it's vital that whatever is happening on the political side between India and Egypt at the bilateral government-to-government side is accompanied and complemented by an equally active public diplomacy effort. And I say this because I think over a period of time, particularly through the 80s, 90s, we started looking away from each other. Perhaps we were both looking westwards and not at each other. And so when you talk to an older generation of Indians and Egyptians who have this enormous nostalgia for the heyday of the relationship, then I think it's important that we don't take, we're not complacent, we don't take for granted that this is going to continue. And I would particularly encourage that we be imaginative in coming out with programs for the youth engagement, because what I found during my time in Egypt was, again, it's not unusual that the youth of India look westwards and the youth of Egypt look westwards, but how do you get them to look at each other? Bollywood has been a great connector, especially amongst the women, if not so much amongst the young men. But I think if we were to identify areas of common interest amongst them, whether it is technology or entertainment or media or any of these things, and I would just volunteer that as our economies grow and start talking to each other much more, we perhaps should look at how our young entrepreneurs and professionals understand each other's economic systems, that they don't approach it through Western eyes. And with some countries, we, I think, have very useful internship programs where young professionals are able to come and do internships in Bangalore or in Mumbai or in Delhi or elsewhere. It has to be reciprocal, of course. Both sides can do it. But I think it's important that we start looking at building those channels of engagement between young people. And if I can recommend from my other stint as High Commissioner to Australia, we have something called the Australia-India Youth Dialogue, which serves as a very useful model of how you can get young people, say young professionals in their late 20s, early 30s, to connect with each other across media and technology and business and even voluntary organizations. So I really think that that kind of a public diplomacy effort is needed, perhaps also supplemented by a cultural diplomacy effort, which again connects people to people. For me, one of the highlights of my tenure there was the India by the Nile festival that we created, and I was fortunate that the Sanmar group were the first to come on board to offer financial support for a very interesting PPP sort of a model to create a cultural festival. For me, it was satisfying that it continued for the next 6 or 7 years after I had left, and the impact, at least at a popular level, and including with the youth, of establishing that connect was quite palpable. We've also got to give up this habit that we've developed of seeing each other through Western eyes, largely because the media is what it reports, what you consume about Indian media in Egypt is largely through Reuters and AP and others, and same is the case here in Delhi. And I know that it's there are all sorts of commercial viability and financial issues in terms of posting foreign correspondence these days, but then the word is much closer today than it was before. So perhaps, whether it's collaboration between news agencies, whether it is building other channels and networks that bridge the information gap, there is no dearth of it, information today, but how do we consume it? How do we consume each other's information directly, I think is something that certainly interests me. As is the area of collaboration between think tanks of the two countries. Here, ICWA has this long-standing agreement with the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs. When I was in Egypt, we also brought together a collaboration between the Observer Research Foundation and the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, headed by former Minister Nabil Fahmy. And those were very useful platforms where you could have both track two sort of conversations, but also others aimed at developing a better understanding of each other. And Ambassador, you mentioned about our convergence on a number of issues on climate change and so on. And I think one of the areas where we can go beyond the conventional conversations is looking at some of the new and emerging areas which matter particularly to our countries and to the youth in our countries, given the demographics we have. And by that I mean the entire range of issues related to digital governance, use of data, some of the conversations that are taking place in the West. And some of these conversations are very vigorously taking place between India and the West, but they're not taking place between India and Egypt to the same degree, even though they matter much more perhaps to our citizens. I think India is emerging as a bit of a global leader in the domain of public digital goods, and perhaps this is something that we can work together on to see whether some of these things that India is developing are replicable, not just in Egypt, but with Egypt and other countries where you enjoy a very substantial outreach. I also think that while it's so easy to talk about all of the areas that we agree upon, we should also have candid conversations on those that we do not fully agree on, so that they don't leave a bitterness in the mouth. And those need not be associated with the president's visit, but I think if we, both of us fervently believe on a reform of the multilateral system, and we agree that it is broken and needs to be fixed, then how do we try and find common ground now that we are again back close with each other, between our G4 aspirations and Egypt's membership of the Coffee Club and all of that, to try and be creative in coming up with some common understandings. And the final point I'll really make is that there is a need for us to talk up each other's strengths in our respective countries. And we perhaps don't do that enough. I really think that the way Egypt is developing its Suez Canal economic zone is a fantastic opportunity for Indian businesses for all of the reasons that Ambassador Hamid has outlined. But across India, what is the degree of awareness about the opportunities that it offers? Our business groups in Chennai, for example, apart from you who are already present in Egypt, are they seized of the new opportunities that are coming up? So I think we need to work together in seeing how we can create the buzz in our respective industry circles about the opportunities. And I recognize that none of this can happen on the cheap. And so the governments, I guess, will have to allocate some amount of both financial and human resources to these endeavors if we are really going to try and translate some of these thoughts and ideals into actual reality on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Navdeep Suri. You have really given a very good insight into what the agenda should look like when the visit takes place. Broadly, three things I have noted. One is the emphasis, your emphasis on public diplomacy and how imaginatively both countries could engage the youth through various programs. You have cited internships and a youth dialogue, and certainly we do have a lot of youth programs, and I think that two countries can work together. You were the pioneer for the cultural exchange also by starting the India by the Nile Festival, which is continuing in full swing. We have added newer dimensions to that festival. Collaboration between the think tanks, again, ICWA and Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs are bound by an agreement. We would look forward to greater engagement between the two institutions. And yes, I agree with you that there has to be a more buzz between the industries of both sides about the awareness of the opportunities available, especially what Ambassador Wael has said about Egypt could be one of the important conduits for India's exports worldwide. To that extent, I would share that during the presidential visit, we have planned to have a business roundtable, which the Embassy of Egypt would be hosting it, where we would be having participation from all leading chambers of commerce and important business players also. So now moving on, I would like to invite a very distinguished journalist, Mr. Atul Aneja, who is currently the editor of IndiaNarratives.com. He was earlier associated with The Hindu as its strategic affairs editor and was its West Asia correspondent as well. He has a great deal of experience in reporting from conflict zones, and he was the war correspondent for Lebanon war during July and August 2006. And he has also covered Kargil war in 1999 from Kashmir. So please, sir, will you please share with you how you see things between India and Egypt from a journalist's perspective, and what are your advices to the two sides?
Thank you, Secretary Ausaf Sayeed. Being the third speaker, I don't think there's very much left on the plate, but let me try and just flag off a few points. I completely agree with Ambassador Hamid that this is a new era, and both Egypt and India are countries which are civilizational states, and both countries exercise tremendous amount of strategic autonomy, which means complete independence in the way they think of their foreign policy, their domestic policies, and not really look over the shoulder how the West or new countries which are on the horizon look at them. And that is something which is deeply shared, and therefore I think this is completely a new paradigm in which this visit of President Al-Sisi is taking place. And this gives us a doctrinal space, really, to amplify our relationship both in the bilateral spheres, but this is going way beyond bilateral. Ambassador Hamid mentioned about developing countries, that both countries can jointly exercise leadership with other developing countries. G20 gives another opportunity to do that. So it's in a way not a strategic partnership in the making, which has regional, if not global, dimensions. And this is the space in the given current situation of flux. We need to expand even more, because fortunately, I think there is an opportunity here. When we were sort of boxed into a Cold War situation, there was hardly any room for maneuver. And now you have the emergence of a post-COVID world, which is deeply in flux. Of course, there are always conflicts before a new order settles in, but before the new world order settles in, I think India and Egypt have the capacity, the bandwidth, and the history to shape this new world order. And so I think we need to be extremely ambitious here to seize the current geopolitical and geoeconomic moment and expand our space bilaterally, and then play a leadership role in not only the developing countries, but also influencing the global agenda, which may take place at the United Nations Multilateral Forum. G20 is one which has already been flagged. So I think we need to look afresh at the entire gamut of relationship. What are the specific areas we can look at? There was a mention of Suez Canal, extremely important for India, and of course, Egypt is one of the custodians, if not the main player in the Suez Canal transit. 500,000 barrels of oil, which India imports per day, passes through the Suez Canal. I mean, it's just so vital for our energy security. And therefore, there is a joint stake here to ensure a secure Suez Canal. I mean, also the oil products which India exports, the refined products which India exports. We are the sixth largest exporter here, whose ships are passing through the Suez Canal with the refined products. So extremely vital zone, and that's where the security element comes in, that how do we make sure that jointly we can establish, first of all, a concrete strategic forum where we look at the problem and look at possible concrete plans for security here. And then the vital role which Egypt plays in Africa, whether it is Sudan, whether it is in the Horn of Africa, extremely important areas, because these are the countries which are very close to the entry point of the Red Sea, which is the Bab el-Mandab. So how do we, and therefore again India has a huge stake here, that is not blocked. We were given a notice here when the piracy problem took place in such a big way that we need to secure these areas. Now Egypt is one player, and given India's role or aspirations or even compulsions in the Indian Ocean, I think that is one area we again need to look at how to collaborate in Africa. And Egypt's own relationship, if you look at in the big picture, especially with the Gulf countries now, whether it is Saudi Arabia, whether it is the UAE, even Qatar, Egypt has a very vibrant and a strong relationship. The way I look at it, that one is, of course, the wealthy Gulf petrodollar-rich countries can be a source of financing for Egypt, but without Egypt providing certain security to these countries, I think there's a very even equation here between Egypt and the Gulf countries. And so therefore, when we look at security in these regions, we got to factor in Egypt, GCC, and India. And among the GCC, if you look at UAE, I mean, it has already established a military base. New ambitious powers in the making. A small country like UAE has a base in Aden, for example, right at the mouth of the Bab el-Mandab. I mean, there are other new bases which are coming up where both UAE and Saudi Arabia are involved. So these are players which India is engaging bilaterally, the Egyptians are engaging bilaterally, but how do we get all of us together? Is there a new formulation which we are on the cusp of that, a new partnership beyond the bilateral partnership which is required here for ensuring, again, a very vital security zone in that part of the world? So I think these are new opportunities which are coming up, and rising India and a rejuvenated Egypt can play, it's an uncharted territory, frankly, which we need to look afresh. And again, since both of us exercise strategic autonomy very independently and very clearly focused on our national interests rather than looking over our shoulders. I think there's one very important aspect I need to flag off, that is the geocultural dimension. I think it's extremely important we tap into it. Both are civilizational states. Is there a need for new research on pharaonic Egypt and ancient India, for example, as a starting point? And we start looking at our histories together and sort of build another bridge, a very strongly focused bridge with resources on the geocultural dimension, not just geopolitical and geoeconomic, but the geocultural aspect is equally important. That will deepen our identity and strengthen our strategic autonomy much more, because it will give new foundations to this relationship. And look at Egypt's relations with other countries. You know, you have a great relationship now with Jordan and Iraq. You know, there's a new Levant organization which has come up, where Egypt is a central player. And then in energy, in the Eastern Mediterranean, if you have the Eastern Mediterranean Forum, if I'm not mistaken, which has come up, which is on oil and gas. And then we have also an interest over there in that geography, because of the Turkish. I mean, now Turks are players, and I know that President al-Sisi and President Erdogan did meet at football diplomacy, as they call it, in Doha. So that relationship has started, but there are deep contradictions there, and we have a quite honestly, as a journalist, I can say we have deep contradictions with Turkey. And that becomes another common area where the two of us need to work together in the Eastern Mediterranean, especially when it comes to geographies like Cyprus and Greece. So, I mean, there's a conflation here of geopolitical, geoeconomic, and geocultural. And on top of that, we need a strong strategic partnership, which the ambassador had spoken about. I think if we have that framework, probably we can chart out the overall vision of what Egypt and India can do together. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Atul Aneja. You have really touched upon several important key aspects. Both countries have strategic autonomy and have independent foreign policies, could work together closely for securing our oil supplies and securing our trade by ensuring the security of Suez Canal, Bab el-Mandab, and also the two countries can work together in Africa, recognizing the vital role Egypt plays in overall in Africa, but more particular in the Horn of Africa, and your emphasis that the time has come that the two countries should also look at geocultural dimension in the relationship, not just geostrategic. Thank you so much once again. Now, our last panelist is a man from the industry. There is always an industry perspective to relationship, and which is a very important parameter nowadays for by judging the success of any bilateral relationship. I have the pleasure of inviting Mr. P.S. Jayaraman, Chairman of TCI Sanmar Chemicals, who has set up a very successful factory for caustic soda and PVC in Egypt. And this is a successful model that we always talk about and quote it to different countries. So may I invite Mr. P.S. Jayaraman to share his perspective, particularly on the industry aspects and investments, and why did you choose Egypt and what has been your experience since then?
Thank you, Secretary Dr. Ausaf. It's always tough to share a dais loaded with so many diplomats, but at the same time I'll try to do the best of the opportunity that is given to me. First of all, I also thank the ICWA for this excellent opportunity, and it's very fitting that this program is held just before the visit of the President of Egypt into India. As the Secretary explained, we are an Indian company headquartered in Chennai. Started our journey in 2006 in Egypt, setting up a caustic soda PVC plant in a small measure, buying a small company, but then laying the roadmap for bigger investment, which we did, I should say, claim successfully in the last 16 years of our stay. What we have done is we had invested close to about $1.5 billion to create world-class capacities to produce caustic soda and PVC. And this is by far the largest, not only in Egypt, but also in the entire Middle East, North Africa region. And what we do here is, besides the employment generation, blah, 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 but we also export 50% of our production, and what we sell in the domestic market substitutes imports. So thereby it's a win-win for the country as a whole, because it's an import substitution come export earning proposition. We are not stopping here. We are looking at further investments. Why we did all these things and why we look at future investments is because, as the speakers before me touched upon the important subject of the positioning of Egypt, both geographic and otherwise. Nobody can ignore Egypt because it caters to not only 110 million population of Egypt, but as a whole, as the ambassador of Egypt rightly pointed out, it's a huge opportunity which makes one market clubbing about 4 to 5 jurisdictions together by already established FTAs, successful FTAs, and enlarging this horizon. And particularly for any field for that matter, if you touch upon, this is a country which offers excellent opportunities. It is a very fertile area at any point of time, thanks to this kind of demand for the consumer products and commodity products which this country and this particular jurisdiction offers. Of course, one can describe the situation in Egypt as in two separate, distinct situations. One is a time when Excellency Hosni Mubarak was there, and after that, whatever changes that has happened in the country, and post that, what is happening today in the last about 8 to 10 years. All of you are aware that the present regime under President Abdul Fattah Sisi started happening at the same time when our Prime Minister here assumed the office of the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. And both had a clear agenda of ensuring that the country is put up and economic policies are framed, so to say, and ensure that the difficulties which are being faced by the population are all set at rest. And I should say that I don't want to talk about India because it's a known story, but as far as Egypt is concerned, with whom I'm associated for the last 16, 17 years, I can say that the agenda is more than fulfilled at this point of time. How it is fulfilled, several initiatives have been taken relentlessly in the last decade. And to cap it all, in the last 14 or 15 months, the kind of initiatives which have been brought into focus is something which is worth mentioning. For instance, from the industry's point of view, encouraging the private sector investment, there's a single point agenda of encouraging private sector, which is reflected in several other actions demonstrated by the government, including the fact that very recently, in the December 2022, there is President Sisi approved the final version of the state ownership policy document, a very important document. The ambassador of Egypt is fully aware of that, which outlines the future of the state in the economy. It's a very clearly enunciated document. I don't think any other country at this level has brought out this kind of a document. It's worth reading that. And it very clearly says, and not only demonstrates, and it also lays a roadmap how the private sector will play an important role from the present position of around 25 to 26% in the economy, which the private sector plays, how it wants, how it will be taken up to 60 to 65% in the next 5 to 6 years. It's a classic document, and I mean, this is a kind of a important document which is being seen at every stage. And whatever policy initiatives which are being announced by the government takes its thread from this document. That's very important, that's why I want to mention that here. And also the way they have encouraged the, what can I say, the sovereign fund, which is a publicly administered fund as any other country has. But this fund in a very quick time has generated sufficient corpus and with the purpose of encouraging private investments. So the door of this sovereign fund is always open. Anybody can go into that for any advice. And there are, besides that, there are several other governmental initiatives which are already functioning. But this sovereign fund is worth mentioning because it is something works directly under the office of the president. So this is something which is worth mentioning because the focus of this fund is to encourage private sector investments. You talk about any field, whether it is consumers or whether it is commodities, this is a country which offers excellent opportunity. I have myself seen that besides over and above the commodity chemical business in which we are present, where we find the demand is always growing and the capacities which are serving this demand is not even 1/10. So you can understand that with the growing demand, we always have a huge gap in the supply-demand equation, which is being met even now by imports. So there are opportunities not only in the commodity chemicals, but also in the consumer durables, in the consumer, white goods industries, where we have seen that with the growing population slowly increasing the level of the income of the middle income level going up, you can understand the need for the durables like equipments like air conditioners, motor cars, everything is growing. So it offers very good opportunity for this kind of industries to come up. And not only that, the government, with the idea of satisfying the public, with the idea of providing the shelter to the public, have done enough, and they continue to do that in terms of doing all the infrastructure investments in the last 7-8 years. The infrastructure investments which we have seen, I have not seen it in any other country. and the creation of houses, third series of 400,000 dwelling units is being done now as we speak. And it creates the demand for all the ancillaries to that. So like that, there have been excellent situations which have been created for any industry, for any businessman to come and look at the place and exploit the situation to his advantage. So this is where we are. And the government is always there to support. We have seen, I myself have seen, we are able to have one-on-one conversation even on during the pandemic or immediately after that, though physical meetings were prevented, we are able to have MS Team calls. I myself had the benefit of having a call with the governor of the Central Bank of Egypt, which is like Reserve Bank of India, so it's called Central Bank of Egypt. We can have a call with him. So he's able to come on the call and explain, and you can talk to him what you want and give us suggestions. We ourselves, what we have done in the last 5-6 years, we have taken the liberty of taking some of the success examples from India to Egypt and to tell them how it can benefit, if not in the immediate term, in the medium term, the policies which can be framed to benefit the industrialization. So that have been accepted. Several initiatives have been taken already by the government. It is all there as a package. And the government is very clearly enunciated the principle of privatization. And this is for industries to take advantage of the situation. And of course, the COP27 was mentioned, which is a very successful event which was organized under the direct leadership of President Sisi. And several MOUs have been signed. And particularly for the green energy and the green hydrogen production, what the ambassador mentioned is worth talking about, because 1/3 of that green hydrogen investments, the MOUs have been signed by Indian companies. So that shows that how India is looking at these kind of opportunities to move forward in this direction. So this is, there have been, green light has been, signals have been given for construction of speed rail lines. Domestic cultivation of wheat has been given good encouragement, where there are a lot of equipments required for that, which the Indian companies have come forward to look at that kind of an opportunity. Desalination projects have been announced, which is taking the combined capacity from 2.8 billion to something much, much bigger. And more than that, there has been a formation of a Supreme Council for Investments, consisting of about 5-6 senior ministers. Just to give my example, we had one issue, and we just had to write out a mail to this, and in about 2 weeks' time, my issue got resolved. There is no questions asked. So you were called, you were asked to explain your position. The concerned government or whatever departments are concerned, they were called to explain their position. The verdict came. So this is the kind of the speed with which the government is moving forward now. Don't mistake that I'm not holding a brief for the government of Egypt. At the same time, I'm trying to only narrate our experience as investor of this magnitude in Egypt. And we are encouraged by the investments what you have done, and we are planning to do more investments in that country. Thank you very much, Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jayaraman. You have really, for your encouraging words, which will, I'm sure, that encourage several other companies to look at Egypt for investments. You have talked about the clear economic doctrine which has been announced by the Egyptian government, and also the speedy dispute resolution mechanism through the Supreme Council of Investments. Your own journey in Egypt all these years, I'm sure, is an example which other companies will follow. We are really happy that many Indian companies, particularly the 3 companies which have been talked about recently, signing agreement almost close to $20 billion for green hydrogen. There are several other companies, almost 50 to 60 companies working there. So this is definitely an area where we look at expanding our India-Egypt economic partnership. With this, formal presentations by panelists have ended. Now we may have time for a few questions, I think. So anyone who has some question, please be brief, and then somebody should give the mic. And you please let us know where you...
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead. Yeah, there is a mic.
A beautiful experience I had in Cairo the evening before I left. It was a simple man in a shop who was very influenced by another simple man in India who had no official position. He had no office except to give us freedom. So I walked into his shop and I said, I have $20 and I'm leaving tomorrow morning and I want to buy something small. So he showed me something, a little box with Nefertiti's photograph on it in gold colors. And I said, how much is this? He said, $15. I said, I have $20. Okay, I can. He said, but 1 minute. Are you from India? I said, yes. He said, but I said, I have Indian. He said, do you have an Indian rupee? I said, I have a 100 rupee note. So I showed him the note, and he said, Gandhi. I said, Mahatma Gandhi? He said, yes. I said, what do you know about him? He said, good man. I said, but you have a very good president in India, Hosni Mubarak. He said, no, we don't like him. He said, but I hope you're not going to carry the tale to him in his office. I said, no, I'm going back to India tomorrow. I'm not meeting any government officials. Don't worry. He said, okay. Can you give me your 100 rupee note? I gave it to him. And he said, I'll give it to you for $5. I said, no, but you said 15. He said, no. I'll give it to you for $5. This goes beyond any profit, any commerce. It is the influence of a simple man by another simple man in India. So we should keep that in mind, that the common man should be influenced by good values and good morals.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your comments. Yeah. Yes, Excellency, Ambassador of Turkey.
Actually, it's not easy to make. Thank you. It's working now. I just wanted to say that it's not easy to make a shift between nostalgia and realism. But still, I couldn't escape this. First, I'm very happy to hear this shift from geopolitics to geostrategy between Egypt and India. And this is, by the way, the best way to handle the challenges of the future. Going back to nostalgia, I still have the dreams of the past my sister here spoke about, the days of non-aligned movement, and the memory of Nasser and Nehru with this very nice jacket. By the way, your name Suri means Syrian. So the last point I wanted to talk about, will this great, nice shift have any effects on the question of supporting the Palestinian case and the suffering of the Palestinian people from the two brothers?
Any more questions? Then we can take them. Yes, please. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Kanchi Batra. I'm from the Diplomatist magazine. My question is for the Ambassador of Egypt. Excellency, since assuming your post in New Delhi, India, what personal experiences have you had that have shed a new light on the Indian culture? Thank you.
Okay, very last, please.
Yeah, Excellency Hamid, the way we had a relationship, with Nehru, Nasir and Tito, that was a era of real friendship. When we can follow these people, and why not to strengthen these type of relationship again?
Okay. So I'll ask request Ambassador Wael Mohamed. All the three questions were directed to you. One, you heard the three questions, so please, you go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Madam, for bringing this issue up of people-to-people contact, and I think it, to a great extent, it rhymes with what Ambassador Suri mentioned, how the people feel towards each other, and the natural warmth and appreciation that our people have for each other in Egypt and in India. It's something that I have touched here since the very first day that I arrived. And yet to touch on that question as well, what I have personally felt in this country, one of the things that I haven't felt much since I came here is nostalgia, because the similarities between both countries are just stunning, as I was saying before. But one of the things that I have seen myself and that I have respected a great deal in this country is the level of acceptance of everybody to everybody else. I was in this occasion where we had representatives from 7 or 8 different religions sitting next to each other, giving in the same dress, almost the same dress, all white, giving sermons in their language for their people in a way that everybody appreciated, respected, and first of all, the respect that they had for each other. And the general aura that I felt during this, at this occasion was that we are all praying for the same thing, for peace, for understanding, for acceptance. And this is exactly the kind of society that Egypt is having, that Egypt is calling for, that Egypt is building now. A culture or a society that is based on citizenship rather than on differences with creed, with beliefs, and so on and so forth. In Egypt, just like in India, we are a country that is tolerant, that is accepting all the others in the society, and the government is dealing with its citizens in terms of rights and duties that are based on citizenship, not on the basis of any other merits that they might think or just might give to themselves. So, and this is something that I think the whole world should be should be accepting also from the idea of acceptance and coexistence. That's something that I respect very much. On the issue of Palestine and whether Egyptian-Indian relationship can bring something for the Palestinian issue, Mr. Ambassador, Your Excellency, you're the ambassador of Syria, and I see our colleagues from the ambassador of Palestine as well. Palestine is and remains very close to our heart. Palestine is and remains the #1 issue, that international issue that we always stand for. And of course, this is going to be one of the issues that we're going to discuss with the Indian side. I don't think there is much differences between Egypt and India on this issue. India has traditionally been known for its very disciplined positions when it comes to when it comes to the Palestinian issue, and so is Egypt. And definitely, it is going to be one of the things that we're going to discuss. That I can guarantee. I'm very sorry. I forgot the last question. I'm very sorry for that. No. I tend to disagree, if you allow me, sir. What I was saying is that we are looking to go even beyond that. The relations between Prime Minister Nehru and President Nasser in the 50s and 60s did not give Egypt the chance to be the chief guest for Republic Day. Now it is happening with Prime Minister Modi because of the personal connection and the understanding and the common agenda that Prime Minister Modi shares with President Sisi. So I think what we are seeing now is something that goes even beyond the 1950s and the 1960s. I can say that if we work for it from now, if we start working on it, we will surpass what we had in the 1950s and the 1960s, albeit in a new context, the context not of a non-aligned movement, but in the context of a world that is being shaped, unfortunately, by double polarization. We have the polarization between East and West, and we have the polarization between North and South. And if you really look at it, at the positions, what I always, and I insist in calling it as such, the disciplined positions of India and the disciplined position of Egypt when it comes to this double polarization, I think the era of Nasser and Nehru can be surpassed by that of Modi and Sisi. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellency, just to add to what he said, India's policy on Palestine, in Egypt, and Libya, and Iraq has been very consistent throughout, and you are very well aware. We recently had a very successful visit of your own foreign minister recently. So I think the two countries can work together to enhance these kinds of partnerships together. We have time for one last question as DG ICWA has permitted. So anyone for one last question? That lady right there down. Or maybe you, sir, please. Or both of them. Both of them, please, yeah.
I have two small questions. Given the many wars Israel has fought with Egypt, what are your relations with Israel now? And secondly, how does Egypt stand on the world economic, in its world economic situation globally?
Yes, madam, girl, you can just please.
Good evening. While most of the questions I believe have been of past, I have a question for the future. So I think as Mr. Suri has mentioned that both the youth of be it Egypt or India look towards the Western world. We view ourselves through the Eurocentric lens and they view us as Oriental lens where the stereotype of Egypt is basically pyramids and of India is of sunny filters and dusty lanes. So as youth, how do you suggest both His Highness and Mr. Suri that how do we reinvent ourselves so that we don't seem to be that third world nation or the global south that the global north or the Western world assume us of?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. On the issue of Israel and how our relationship is with Israel, Egypt is the first, of course, just 2 years ago, everybody was rejoicing over the Abrahamic Accords with the UAE and Bahrain and other countries as well who have decided that they should have peace treaties with Israel. But let's not forget that Egypt was the one who actually opened the door for peace in the region back in the 70s, in the late 70s when President Sadat had a visit to Jerusalem. He was actually standing inside of the Knesset and looking the Israelis eye to eye and extending his hands with peace to the Israeli leaders, yet at the same time telling them that we still have our differences. And the position has not changed much until today. We are in peace with Israel. We have our ambassador there, we have their ambassador at our soil as well. So we have engagements with Israel and we have some kinds of interaction with the Israelis, whether on the economic side or also on the political side. But it is not limited to just that, but it also entails that we can use our leverage on Israel and we look them eye in the eye and we tell them our differences are this and this and this, and this connects me back with the idea of what both countries can do for the Palestinian question. It goes without saying that Egypt has good relationships with Israel and India has wonderful relationship with Israel as well. And as partners, Israel can talk to the Israeli side and Egypt can talk to the Israeli side, because the Israeli side, we think that the political positions, we have so many different political perspectives and political positions from the ones that are taken by the Israeli side. But these are things that we can actually discuss in a way to try to influence and to bridge the differences that we have. So, because time has proven time and time again that by not talking to each other, we will not be able to overcome our differences. The only way to overcome differences is to talk to each other. And this is exactly what we do with Israel and with other countries as well. Now, that's on Israel. On the idea of Eurocentrism, and it really connects me with what Ambassador Suri has mentioned as well as with Mr. Atul Aneja mentioned as well, the idea of geo-culture. This is one of the things I mentioned, what I liked and respected very much about India here. One of the things that is giving me bitterness, the very sad phenomenon that I haven't known much about this country before coming here, because everything that I have known about this country came from books, history books that are written by Western historians from a completely Eurocentric vision. And I'm afraid that everything that India knows about Egypt is also written by historians from the West that look at Egypt from a Eurocentric vision as well. And therefore, we really have to put our hands together and find the idea of geoculture. Our traditions go beyond, much beyond the 1950s or the 1960s. I was personally extremely, as bitter as I was, but it happened that when I was visiting one of the bookstores here in India, I found a wonderful book called Glimpses of History. It's a book written by Prime Minister Nehru to his daughter Indira Gandhi when he was imprisoned about the history of the world. And I read 2 or 3 or 4 times the chapters that he wrote about Egypt. And I found out that Nehru understood about Egypt much more than the West understood about Egypt. So we can understand each other much more if we actually talk to each other rather than taking the West as a bridge between us. This is entirely wrong. We have our intellectuals and we have our understanding of history. India has its intellectuals and its understanding of history. We can actually sit eye to eye and discuss how we see the world and how we see our histories, and we will find that the common elements that we have between us are much more than the differences that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think with this we come to the end of today's panel discussions. We really had very illuminating ideas and thoughts and very encouraging conversations which we had on the subject. I would like to put on record our appreciation and sincere thanks to DG ICCR, Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh, for agreeing to host this very important discussion as a curtain raiser for the important visit of President Sisi to India. And also I thank all the panelists, starting with our Ambassador Wael Mohamed, Awad, for not only giving your comment but also taking much of the questions which were directed to you from your diplomatic colleagues as well as people, Ambassador Navdeep Suri, Mr. Atul Aneja, and Mr. P.S. Jayaraman. I also thank all the participants, former ambassadors and colleagues from the MEA and the media and the industry for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. Thank you so much.
On behalf of Indian Council of World Affairs, I would like to thank Dr. Ausaf Sayeed for delivering the keynote address and chairing today's panel discussion. We are also thankful to His Excellency Mr. Wael Mohamed Awad Hamid, Ambassador of the Republic of Egypt to India, for participating in the discussion and delivering the special remarks. We are also thankful to other members of the panel, Ambassador Navdeep Suri, Mr. Atul Aneja, and P.S. Jayaraman for taking out time for this event. We also extend our gratitude to members of the diplomatic corps, academic and strategic community, and other dignitaries among the audience for their participation. May I now request all of you to join us for the high tea at the fire. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very well connected.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.